Hello my friends, my name is Artur and I am an Estonian soldier. US has many incredible weapons in its military. It has tanks, planes, helicopters. We have talked about all of that, but there's one special thing about it: aircraft carriers. They're the most expensive ships in the world, the biggest ships in the world, and only a few countries in the world possess them. So they're almost like nuclear weapons. You don't use them, things are already out of hand if you have to use them. We will find out today how do the aircraft carriers work. How do they stay afloat so long time? I've heard they can stay on sea for over a year, maybe even more. Maybe they're even nuclear powered. Before we start, I want to thank the Patreons. They're the ones who support the channel every month and make sure I can make these videos. We have Karola Siinma, yes. A very Estonian name. It might seem a weird name for you Americans, but actually yes, this is the second Estonian ever to support me on Patreon. Thank you, Karola. Aitäh. Drew Kaplan, thank you for becoming a Patreon. And finally we have Monty Chipley. Thank you, Monty, for becoming a patron. Alright my friends, let's see what are the aircraft carriers. Go and grab your Estonian Youtuber Cup and let's dive into the video.
A single aircraft carrier is enough to markedly change the level of a nation's military might. These ships are one of the strongest single assets a military can have. In general, under international law, aircraft carriers can legally position themselves up to 14 miles or 22 kilometers from any country's coast. Clearly, the strategic influence of being able to place a military...
If you can place that many planes, a very deadly plane, so close to enemy coast, you basically own their airspace unless they have very strong anti-air weaponry, which most of the countries in the world don't. So if you have this aircraft carrier, you have access to any place in the world by sea, and you can threaten any nation. It is truly the strongest asset you can have as a military.
Airbase just miles from any coast in the world is enormous, especially given that 80% of the world's population lives within 60 miles or 100 kilometers from the ocean. While plenty of military vessels are capable of launching helicopters, there are just 19 aircraft carriers worldwide currently in service capable of launching fixed-wing airplanes. China, Thailand, India, Russia, and France each have one, Italy has 2, and the US has the 11 largest in the world.
US is 11? What? How? China has 1, Russia has 1, India has 1, and Italy has 2. Alright, that's weird, but US has 11. I've heard about the numbers, I know how expensive they are, and how is this possible? Who's paying for this? Are you guys paying for this? You must be rich, man.
These largest carriers require over 6,000 people to operate and often stay deployed for up to a year. They are fully fledged cities at sea. The most advanced aircraft carriers, like the French Navy's Charles de Gaulle, are capable of launching an aircraft every 30 seconds. That means that, for a brief period, when launching aircraft at its maximum rate, the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle becomes busier than Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. To be able to achieve such a capability on a moving ship is no easy feat. While the operation of these vessels gives militaries enormous strategic advantage, they also represent one of their greatest operational challenges. An aircraft carrier's offensive weapon is its aircraft. On board, carriers tend to only have a small number of defensive weapons such as surface-to-air missiles and machine guns. But of course, just like any powerful military asset, these carriers are big targets. It is for this reason that carriers never travel alone while on deployment.
Yeah, I figured, it said in the beginning, if you have this, you are on a very high place in military rank in the world, but still if you only have this, no, you can't allow. If you have money for this, you have to have money for the defensive fleet also. They cannot travel alone. One torpedo can take this down if there's no navy around it. There has to be a whole fleet around it. Anti-air fleet, anti-ship fleet, anti-submarine fleet, everything. A whole protection squad has to be there, otherwise this thing will go down quite easy. So owning this comes at a very high price, like a hidden price. You have to buy a whole fleet.
While the exact composition can change depending on the mission, the carrier strike groups American carriers travel with are typically made up of a guided missile cruiser equipped with Tomahawk missiles, 2 guided missile destroyers, an attack submarine, and a supply ship. An aircraft carrier is the flagship of this strike group, meaning that, in its command area, it not only has a bridge and an air traffic control center, it also has a flag bridge where an admiral commands the entire strike group. Each of the group's ships serves some combination of offensive and defensive roles. The only exception is the supply ship. Most aircraft carriers don't need regular refueling. All 11 American carriers and the French one are nuclear powered, meaning they can sail an unlimited distance for 25 years without refueling.
25 years! You can sail for 25 years without refueling. Alright, let me tell you, if zombie apocalypse happens, I'm gonna find myself an airstrike carrier, one of the 19 in the world, I mean not 19, 12 that are nuclear. I'm gonna go on top of that, never come on land again, except for kill occasional zombies. Look, how do the Indian or China's or Russian aircraft carriers work? On diesel engines? It makes sense to make them nuclear. Of course, they have to be away at sea for a year sometimes if war is going on. You might not be able to fuel. But I guess you would have to come to land to restock food and ammunition, right? You don't have that for 25 years, not possible.
Even conventionally powered aircraft carriers like the UK's HMS Queen Elizabeth can travel up to 12,000 miles or 18,000 kilometers without refueling, making the need for stops infrequent. While an American or French carrier could hypothetically sail non-stop for years or even decades, what they can't do is carry enough food, which is always needed, and aviation fuel, which is needed for combat operations, to stay at sea for more than a few weeks at a time. It would be inefficient and place the carriers in a position of vulnerability to have to visit a port every few weeks to restock, especially during combat operations, so they don't. They restock while at sea. The supply ships that move as part of the strike group will sail off to a nearby port to take on fuel, ammunition, food, and mail, sail back to the strike group, then match speed and maneuver alongside the carrier. From there, the two ships will shoot lines across to each other. These lines are used to pull hoses over to the carrier, which are used to transfer aviation fuel. To transfer solid supplies, there are two methods. The first is attaching pallets to dollies that wheel cargo over to the carrier like a zipline. The second method, which is considered simpler yet more dangerous, is using helicopters to pick up pallets from the resupply ship and flying them over to the carrier. These transfers bring both crucial supplies like food and some less crucial items like mail, but this—
Actually, yeah, we're talking about, if I think about it, this is a ginormous damn ship. It's like an island floating around in the ocean. Docking that thing is not that easy and it's quite dangerous, so it would make sense to just keep it at sea at all times and only refuel, and fuel it with other smaller ships that can go and dock and take refuel, take ammunition, take food. Makes a lot of sense. This really makes you think, you know, you might think, oh, the US main enemy, North Korea, China, Russia, all of them. China has one aircraft carrier and Russia has only one, and North Korea doesn't have any. The US has 11. If necessary, they can just surround all of those three countries' coastlines and basically have air superiority almost over those countries. There's not even a competition. It's unfair. It's truly unfair. But I like it as that way because we are on the same side, my friends, which makes me very glad. Oh yeah, let's go. The Estonian Youtuber Cup competition. 7 points for 7 states. Let's see who they are. We have Richard Witt, Sacramento, California. Yeah, I heard about Sacramento a lot actually when I lived in Hollywood. Everybody knew somebody who was from there, so I'm familiar with the place. Way to go, Richard. Almost 20 for California. We have Quinton Okamura. So Quinton is a very Western American name, but Okamura couldn't be more Japanese. You are from Denver, Colorado, not Japan. But I mean, America does have a lot of Chinese, Japanese, everybody. Name me a nation who doesn't live in America. North Koreans, you don't have those. We have Jeffrey Jones from Coral Springs, Florida. Another Florida man. We have many of them here, over 20 actually to be exact. That many Florida men, it's almost... yeah, it's a deadly weapon. Tyler York from Payson, Utah. What else is in Utah? Is the Grand Canyon in Utah? I know it's a desert state. We have one Everett Hall. Hold your horses, hold, wait a minute. Everett Hall did not get 1 cup, no, he got 2 cups because he's not a basic person, he's a very special one. Everett, you're from Roanoke, Alabama. How does that song go? Sweet home Alabama. I don't remember the words, I don't remember the tune even, but I know it's a very famous song about Alabama. We have John Gutierrez. Gutierrez, a very Spanish name, a Mexican name perhaps. You are from Wentzville. Sounds German, but it's in Missouri. Only the 3rd one from Missouri. We still do have states that only have 1 or 2, maybe 3 orders. Most of them have 5, 6, some 10, and then there's Texas, you know, with over 40. But we do have 1, 2 or 3 order states. Those states need some help. For example, Arkansas, 2 only. New Mexico also only 2. Kevin Chudzinski. Chudzinski is almost like a Polish family name. You're from North Liberty. I mean, US, of course, liberty, freedom, but North Liberty, you have even a special place for liberty to be at. And of course, it's in Iowa. Very nice of you to get the cup. Keep doing what you do. Get the cups. Represent your states. Put them on the Hall of Fame. Back to the video.
This isn't the only way mail arrives on American aircraft carriers. Each carrier actually has a mailing address just like any building in the US. For example, this is the USS Gerald R. Ford address. Families of sailors can send mail to these addresses in the same way that they could to any other, and, in fact, it costs the exact same as a shipment to any other US address.
Hey, if you're in a US aircraft carrier, go and get the cup. There's an address, right? Get it. I want to see one sent to one of those 11 aircraft carriers. I would make a separate video on that. That's so special.
Even if the ship is on the other side of the world. Sailors can even order packages online to their ship. Expedited mail often makes it from an address in the US to a carrier sailing somewhere around the world in just 10 days. Having this speed requires more frequent deliveries than those of the logistics ships, but conveniently, carriers are airports at sea. American carriers currently use a fleet of C-2 Greyhounds as cargo aircraft, providing a high-frequency, often daily connection between carriers and shore. When cruising in the South China Sea, for example, as the USS Ronald Reagan did in November 2018, mail might be sent to Singapore via conventional means. A C-2 Greyhound would then fly from the ship to Singapore, pick up...
Cruising in the South China Sea, that's a very dangerous place to be at. I mean, China must be very angry at that. I mean, you have tens of US fighters just off your coastline, capable of attacking almost any point of your coastal defense system within seconds. Oh, I would be very mad. Maybe that's why they're building the South China Islands with sand to claim the sea, you know. US is playing a dangerous game going that close to China. You guys are brave.
Pick up the mail and fly back to the ship. As carriers sail around the world, the pickup points of the C-2 Greyhounds are continuously shifted to nearby friendly nations. While mail does wonders for increasing crew morale, that's actually the lowest priority cargo for the C-2 Greyhounds. The aircraft are integral for bringing on spare parts for all the carrier's aircraft and transporting VIPs, press, and other individuals to and from the carriers. The C-2 Greyhound is about the same size as an Embraer 145, a civilian aircraft capable of carrying 50 people, so it's not tiny. The longest aircraft carrier in the world, which also happens to be the newest, is the USS Gerald R. Ford, but even she is only 1,106 feet or 337 meters long. So
that's not that big actually. Even if you're a civilian, I don't know, post-air pilot, you have to know how to land these. You can't, if you're only used to landing on land airports, you can't really use that, right? Because that's 330 meters. You're gonna just dive into the ocean. This needs separate training, I'm quite sure. Even for a post-pilot, I don't know how you call it, but they still need to have the training, I'm quite sure. Also, I've heard that some of the US fighters can actually lift into the air vertically. Just lift up. I always wondered, how does that work? What kind of fuel do they have to do that? Or why don't all of the US fighters work like that? I mean, that's so much better. You don't even need the runway for that.
With commercial airports, a runway of 5,000 feet or 1,500 meters, like the one at London City Airport in London, is considered short, while large airports like London Heathrow will have runways longer than 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters. So how do C-2 Greyhounds and other aircraft on carriers deal with having runways of only 1,100 feet or 330 meters long? They don't. They take off with just 325 feet or 99 meters of space.
What?
All US and French carriers use a system of catapults to get aircraft up to takeoff speed within 3 to 4 seconds. This allows these carriers to launch a decently sized aircraft like the C-2 Greyhound with their relatively short decks. Other carriers, like the Chinese and Indian ones, don't have catapults, so they can only launch lighter, shorter range aircraft capable of taking off with a very short runway.
What do you mean you don't have catapults? That limits your capabilities a lot. I mean, the US can have as strong fighters as they want, launching from that carrier. But China, if you don't have catapults, right, you have to use very light aircrafts. And that means weaker ammunition, lesser fuel, lower capabilities of aerial power. As I told you, there's no competition. There's no competition against this. And I'm quite sure China and Russia's aircraft carriers, knowing those nations, they might be quite old.
Both these two types of carriers have arrestor wires that aircraft catch on landing to decelerate with a short distance given. Every other aircraft carrier out there can only operate with aircraft capable of vertical landing. What takes place on the flight deck is carefully choreographed chaos. On American carriers, everyone's job is easily identifiable by the color shirt they wear. Yellow shirts deal with navigating aircraft around the deck. Blue shirts are assistants to yellow shirts driving tugs, operating elevators, delivering messages, and more. Red shirts do all the handling and mounting of ammunition. Purple shirts manage aircraft fueling. Green shirts are worn by a few different groups including catapult crews, maintenance personnel, cargo handlers, and more. White shirts are also worn by a mix of personnel including those helping aircraft land, working as medical personnel, and more. And lastly, brown shirts are worn by plane captains, who are not those that fly the aircraft. They're individually in charge of overseeing all work for getting an aircraft ready for flight. The flight deck is a dangerous place given its small size. It's so small that all the carrier's aircraft can't fit on it, but of course just below the flight deck is the hangar. A large carrier can carry up to 100 aircraft, so massive elevators bring aircraft from the flight deck to the hangar for storage.
They have elevators for planes on a ship. Listen to this. Catapults for planes, elevators for planes, and an underground, you would call it underground, but it's not underground because it's on sea, it's just the level below the main level, hangar for aircrafts. How cool is that? Truly is a city, it's like a fortress. If AC-130 is like a flying fortress, then this is like a floating fortress.
When not in use. About 6,000 people work and live aboard each American carrier. 3,200 of them have jobs related to running the ship itself. That includes everything from working in the engine room, maintaining the nuclear reactor, cleaning the decks, to actually working up in the bridge commanding the ship. Many of these jobs are below deck, and since all the above deck space is used for flight operations, many on board can—
They're making cakes! Okay, obviously they're making cakes, it's a very big ship, 6,000 people, they do need cakes sometimes also, but you wouldn't think about it if you think about aircraft carriers, but probably they have even McDonald's there, knowing America.
Go weeks without seeing sunlight. 2,500 other personnel are part of the carrier's air wing. If this was an airbase on land, these would be everyone working there, including air traffic controllers, aircraft mechanics, fuelers, pilots, and more. The few hundred remaining personnel work assorted other jobs. In terms of personal space, enlisted personnel, the vast majority of those on board, only get a single bunk in a room with sometimes more than 100 others. Higher-ranked individuals, though, of course have more spacious accommodations. As long-term homes for thousands of people, these ships also have a few small luxuries like stores, gyms, barbershops, lounges, and more.
Where's the McDonald's? I'm waiting for the McDonald's.
Space is at a premium when 6,000 people are packed into one floating hall, and the mission is paramount. Since their heyday in World War II, some have started to question the place aircraft carriers have in modern warfare. Every operating country aside from the US tend to, at any given moment, have their ships either in combat, in training, or at home. The US tends to use its carriers for a fourth function: power projection. At any given moment, there is almost certainly an American carrier cruising somewhere in the world. In fact, January 2017 was the first time since World War II that there was not an American aircraft carrier on deployment. Even if there wasn't an aircraft carrier on deployment, they're fast. They have a top speed of 35 miles or 56 kilometers per hour, meaning that a Norfolk, Virginia-based carrier could get to the Middle East in just a week. In the Pacific, the US has an even greater advantage since it has the USS Ronald Reagan based in Yokosuka, Japan, from where it could reach the shores of North Korea, for example, in just 29 hours.
Ooh.
American carriers spend plenty of time just cruising around the world's oceans, reminding other countries of the US's military power. For example,
it is exactly like the world's policeman. It is truly, I mean, the role of police is not only to take down criminals and put them in jail, it's also just to be there to remind people that we have laws here, we have repercussions if you do something wrong, and this is exactly what this is. It's like the police car of the world seas, of the world politics, US aircraft carriers just cruising along, reminding you always, do not go bad, don't break bad, otherwise these aircraft carriers will come and bomb your airfields crazy. This is for North Korea, China, and Russia.
For example, the USS Ronald Reagan returned from a 4-month deployment from August to December 2018, during which it saw zero combat. It spent much of the time cruising around the South China Sea, an area in which China is attempting to assert military control, much to the US's displeasure. Elsewhere in Asia, American carriers also regularly make visits to the Korean peninsula to remind North Korea of their presence. This reached a peak in November 2017 as tensions with North Korea reached a peak when 3 American carriers loomed near Korean shores.
Ooh.
With their enormous power,
3 carriers could take down an entire country within a day. I'm telling you that.
Though, aircraft carriers represent an enormous target, especially in the era of stealthy drones and precise missiles. The sinking of a single US aircraft carrier could result in more American military deaths than the entire Iraq War, in addition to the loss of tens of billions of dollars in military assets. While no aircraft carrier of any nation has been sunk since World War II, it's potentially more possible than one would think. US carriers regularly participate in war games where combat conditions are simulated with allies. There have been 2 concerning incidents in 2005 and 2015 where Swedish and French submarines, respectively, have won the games against US carriers. What this means is that the 2 countries' submarines approach close enough to the carriers where they could have, if they were an enemy in real combat, launched torpedoes and potentially sank the carriers. Meanwhile, the US has already received the first of 10 in a new class of carriers, while China, India, and the UK each have carriers under construction, so, despite their possible obsolescence, we can be sure that the aircraft carrier won't be leaving the world's oceans anytime soon.
It takes probably only one good shot torpedo and a lucky submarine to take it down, and the loss would be thousands of lives, billions of dollars, and a huge defeat in moral, because no aircraft carriers have been sunk before, but if one would be, and if it would be the US carrier, that would destroy a lot of images that the US is the strongest and all of that. But I don't think that will happen, because name me a country who would want to go to war. I mean, if you sink that, you're basically saying, I want to go all out war. I don't think any country would want to do that with the US. It's a stupid move, let me tell you. It's maybe a proxy war, you know, like Russia and China are doing, but not directly. That would be dumb, the dumbest thing to do. So I don't think it will ever happen. We know more information about another branch of the US military. There is so much more for me to watch, so much. If you want to recommend something for me, become a patron and send me a message through there. I'll read them all and I'll do the videos you send me. Meanwhile, go and get the Estonian Youtuber Cup, and as always, my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye bye.